Hi, and welcome to the NBA show. My name is Morten Jensen, and today we'll be talking again about the NBA trade deadline, which is only 24 hours away. So this is down to the last one. This is 1 day left. So let's look at the rumors. Let's look at what's going on. Stay tuned. So full disclosure, every single morning or late morning or early afternoon, there's usually this big news dump from NBA writers and pundits and journalists. So far, even though I've actually waited more than I wanted to, that news dump has just not arrived yet. So I am recording this with somewhat limited intel over the past 24 hours, but I did manage to pick up something I really haven't talked about a whole lot. And chief among them is that Lonzo Ball wants $20 million per year on his new contract. I think that's a very substantial number, and I think it's interesting to dig into it and basically ask, is he worth it? So let's try to explore that just a little bit. So many will point out that Ball is not really that high volume of an assist guy or a rebound guy this year compared to usual years. But that doesn't really matter, in my opinion. He has grown as a shooter. He's hitting almost 77% from the free throw line, over 38% from the 3-point line on almost 8 attempts per game. Like, the shooting efficiency has really increased this year, and that was the biggest hurdle with him coming into the NBA back in 2017. Now we're looking at a guy who's no longer an offensive liability. We're looking at someone who, from a scoring perspective, can actually participate, get himself involved, stretch out the defense, and hit free throws, which I guess for most people sitting around going, well, is that really important? Yes, that's tremendously important. Even if it's on low volume, it means that you can't foul him at the end of games, hoping that he misses. He's just too reliable now. Granted, it's a small sample size. Things could change. But right now, at this point in time, he's actually looking like a very competent offensive player. And that was really what everyone was waiting on. The defense was already there. The rebounding was already there. And even though the assists and the rebounds are down this year, it's more a result of the players around him than it is him. I like how Lonzo Ball is playing right now. And I think $20 million isn't really that bad. I mean, we're talking about a guy here who is no longer a offensive liability. He's a defensive asset. He's a good rebounder. Now he's a high volume 3-point shooter. What more do you want from your point guard? Oh, who, by the way, is 6'6". Now, yes, there are still warts to his game. He is not a guy who likes to operate, inside the arc a whole lot. He's not a guy who will crash down into the paint and get a lot of dunks and layups and tough shots around the basket. He's more secure, I want to say, when he's further away from the basket, more as a shooter and as a distance player. That's okay, at least when you have Zion and Brandon Ingram on the roster. That's fine because they're going to be occupying that space anyway. There's not really that room for him to develop into a type of slasher. So it works. So for the Pelicans, specifically considering their roster, considering their needs, how they need to build everything up, I like that fit long term. I really do. And it makes me wonder if Ball is really not that big of a trade candidate as we thought he would be. Now, sure, teams are looking at his evolution and going, we want a piece of that. We want Lonzo Ball in our farm. Get it. Totally get it. But maybe the Pelicans now are looking at that and going, maybe not. We want to hang on to him. We want to make sure that Zion and Brandon are flanked by Lonzo's defense, floor spacing, and all these things. Like, basically, when you look at Lonzo Ball, he's become a rich man's 3-and-D point guard. He's become Derek Fisher on steroids and growing to 6'6". It's really a unique set of skills and size and IQ. I'm in. Maybe 20 million sounds like a lot, but I'm in. It's fine. You can move that contract if you need to. He's still so young, and the way that he progressed this year, I'm in. I think he's worth that contract. I think he has proven himself to be way more than everyone thought he would be. And you can basically just strike those Los Angeles Lakers years away. It wasn't the true representation of who he was. He grew as a player with the New Orleans Pelicans, so why would he leave? And why would they ship him out if they knew that there were more to be had? Because this is really the crux of the issue, right? If he's taking this leap in year 4, who are we to say that he's not going to take yet another leap next year or the year after? He's still so young. For us to sit around and expect him to stagnate or plateau is ridiculous. So if the price is $20 million a year, pay it. Another guy who's been brought up a lot over the past couple weeks is Atlanta Hawks forward John Collins. I've also given him plenty of coverage here on this channel, both in a negative and positive light. You can check everything out if you go through the archives. But he apparently wants to stick with the Atlanta Hawks, and apparently the Hawks are also somewhat keen on that idea. That marriage ultimately looked like it was sort of doomed. It seemed like they wouldn't want to pay him what he thought he was worth. Now he's sort of backing away from his own claim of being a near max or max level player by saying he thought he played himself well into a situation where you could make that argument, which is frankly true when you consider how he produced last year. But yes, max level player, I still disagree with that notion. But if the Hawks and Collins can find some sort of agreement, they can't negotiate or extend right now. That would have to go into the summer. He will be a restricted free agent, so there's still a lot to be done here. But if the two sides are willing to meet, if they want to stick together, that's a huge development for both the Hawks and Collins. Of course, some team could swoop in with a max offer, in which case the Hawks would have a major decision on their hands. But if they show up at John Collins's door at earliest convenient when it's allowed, and they tell him, you know what, let's figure something out, let's hammer out a detail, maybe there's a chance they get him for less. I'm not so sure. I still think that when a guy is offered a full max, and he might, I think it's fair. I think it's fair you look at the dollar amount and go, look, someone else values me much more than you, and I'm willing to take that chance. I think that's an entirely reasonable take to have. So it really depends on what Collins has going for him financially from other teams, and also his own devotion to the Hawks and his own willingness to stay there long term. Like right now, it sounds like he wants to be there. It sounds like the Hawks want that to happen as well. That's good news. Still a lot of work to be done. And despite all that, despite everything, there could come an offer at some point from some team within the next 24 hours that blows the pants off Atlanta, and then you just gotta do it. Now, I know that yesterday I talked about how players and teams need to work together to find the right solution. That is still totally valid. It really is. But sometimes a team can just get a major offer and you have to look at it and you have to make a call. That's the business the NBA is in, both players, general managers, teams, whatever. That's just the reality of the situation. Now, fortunately, for Collins specifically, the Boston Celtics seem to have cooled on their interest for Collins. They are still preferring to go after Aaron Gordon, who's now also being chased, apparently a little bit aggressively, by the Denver Nuggets. So that's a situation that could be interesting to follow over the next day or so. Who knows? I still think Gordon goes to Boston, but that's an interesting subplot right there. But if Boston is off the Collins bandwagon at this point, you have to wonder who else is out there who would really be an aggressive partner. We already know about the Minnesota Timberwolves, but outside of that, is there a significant group of teams out there willing to take on John Collins, willing to also pay him the max and give up significant assets in doing so, while also potentially having to pay him that much money in the summer? That remains to be seen. It's still a sticky situation, but right now it seems like the two parties, Collins and the Hawks, are looking to actually make this marriage a little bit more stable. If that happens, good on them. So a couple of days ago, a report came up saying that the Sacramento Kings had offered Marvin Bagley to the Detroit Pistons for rookie Saddiq Bey, and they had been rejected. I absolutely believe that. Marvin Bagley is still a productive player, averaging around 14 points, 7.5 rebounds for his career. Still a high efficiency player in some respects. Offensively projects to be very, very stable and reliable. That said, he's very much in a similar Lauri Markkanen situation where he doesn't offer you playmaking, defense. There's a lot of holes there. He's not a dribble guy. He's not someone who can initiate the offense. So he's one of those types of dudes that needs to be set up. And as we're seeing now, those guys just don't have that much value in the open market. Now, sure, some team could look at that situation and go, okay, if the Kings got rebuffed on that trade offer, you know what, maybe we can swoop in and we can get Bagley for cheap because we still find him appealing. There's still a lot of potential there left. And to be fair, there is. Maybe that's a scenario where we could see some team just come in out of nowhere, take him on and see what happens. I know that there are, at least in my own private network of NBA pundits and analysts, there are a couple Nuggets fans who think that if they don't get Aaron Gordon, that he could be one of those interesting players to pivot towards, because with having Jokic there, you won't need Marvin Bagley to self-create. He would be set up by Jokic. Now, personally, I don't really see the logic in that. If you have Michael Porter, it seems like there will be some overlap there, but it's an interesting scenario nonetheless. And that's not really a rumor, that's more fan speculation. But I do think it's interesting, and it does hold some merit that if the Nuggets are looking at someone like Aaron Gordon, who will have to play the 4 or at least an interchangeable 3, there is logic in assuming that they would go after a big man of that sort, like a 4, assuming, of course, Gordon isn't materialized in terms of a trade. Also working as a subplot in all this is the fact that Bagley doesn't want to be a King anymore. He wants to go somewhere else where he can develop on his own terms, on his own merit, where he'll get a proper chance, get a consistent minute amount, where he'll get a more carved out role. Now, to be fair, even if there is some positional overlap in Denver, he would get a really established role in Denver as a scorer, because that organization is a little bit weak when it comes to depth. So he would get instantaneously 30 minutes per game, I have to assume. So there is definitely some logic to all of this. Bagley, however, whether he makes it to the Nuggets or not, is a guy who is gettable, very attainable out there, despite being the number 2 overall pick a couple years ago, chosen over Luka Doncic. I'll never get over that. He's available. He's attainable. You can get him. You can keep him. And presumably when he hits free agency after next year, I don't think he will cost as much as, say, John Collins or someone of that ilk. I think you could get him for a pretty fair price. So that's also something that teams would have to look at if they trade for him. Just think in terms of the long term. And I also think that was part of the reason the Pistons declined that offer. Saddiq Bey, after all, is a rookie. He's got another 3.5 years left on his rookie deal. He's tremendously cheap. He's tremendously productive. It just doesn't make sense. So finally, let's talk about Victor Oladipo, because one thing is he wants to go to Miami. That thing has been made pretty apparent in the media over the past couple of weeks. However, a couple of days ago, something opened up in terms of him being open to making it onto the New York Knicks roster as well. So for him to have interest in multiple teams, that also gives him some leverage, especially for this summer when he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. But considering that he won't cost as much in a trade because the Rockets really want to get off of him right now, it might not be a bad idea for the Knicks to get him now, take him on, knowing full well that there is an interest level in Oladipo's part as well, and then re-signing him in the summer if they want to do that. Yes, Oladipo will cost something. You won't get him for free. He will be somewhat cheap, but that is in comparison to what he would have cost you in a trade a couple years ago with the Pacers. Now, he will still cost a pretty penny, but it's just a matter of him not costing multiple first rounders, multiple young guys, as it would have been the case just 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's just a different scenario, and that could actually help the New York Knicks get someone like him onto their roster for fairly cheap, get him a look over a half a year, make him fall in love with their organization, and then you have a guy who might be willing to re-sign in the summer. It's not a bad plan. Of course, that also means that the Heat could be looking at that situation and going, well, the Knicks would get the inside track on him during the summer. We don't want that. We want to have the inside track on Victor Oladipo because we think he fits with Jimmy Butler or whatever the reasoning is. Then they would be looking at trying to make a move for him now, and that could end up being Houston's perfect dream scenario, having two teams competing over Victor Oladipo, thus inflating his price. Nice, right? I mean, that would have to be the biggest get for the Houston Rockets this year if they can get a bidding war going and walk away with a substantial amount of value for a guy who really doesn't want to be there. Thank you for checking out this video. Tomorrow there won't be, this staple 15-17 minute affair. Instead, we'll do a 3-hour live stream of the actual trade deadline. It will run from 1 to 4 PM Eastern. So we'll be covering the 2 hours leading up to the NBA trade deadline and one after, because here's the thing. Teams can still make those trades official as long as they get them into the league before the 3 o'clock deadline. And because of that, trades can trickle in. So we'll be staying on the air for an additional hour and analyzing what's going on, analyzing what's been happening. So I really look forward to doing that. And I look forward to seeing you guys join in and ask a ton of questions, because we'll be sitting there for 3 hours. We're gonna need them. We're gonna need questions, and we're looking forward to it so much. My guest tomorrow will be Rich Damon, an analyst for the Mavs and the Magic, who is active on Twitter at MavsDraft, so check him out as well. I look forward to going at it hard tomorrow with the NBA trade deadline. It's gonna be long, silly, and my mind and brain is going to be utter mush when we're done. But you know what? I can't wait.